I found out my husband's second family existed the same week his mother asked me to sign away my share of the restaurant. Two things. 1 week, and neither of them accidental. I didn't cry in front of either of them. I just asked one question. Whose name is on the lease? Marcus blinked like I'd asked him something in a foreign language. He didn't know I already had the answer. He didn't know I'd had it for 6 days. My name is Renata Cole. I'm 34. I run the books for a restaurant my husband's family has owned for 18 years, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was building something. If you've ever found out the people closest to you had already written you out of the story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Let me back up, because the lease question didn't come from nowhere. I've been the bookkeeper and unofficial general manager of Del Mar's, a family restaurant in Savannah, since I married into it in 2019. My mother-in-law, Corinne Delmar, founded it with her late husband, Edmund, who died in 2016 and left the restaurant's ownership split between Corinne and Marcus, with a clause that any future spouse's stake had to be gifted, not inherited. Language a young lawyer had written to protect the family from exactly the kind of divorce Corinne had gone through with her own first husband. I run everything else: payroll, vendor contracts, health inspections, the 2 a.m. calls when the walk-in freezer dies. For 5 years I've made this place profitable. Revenue was up 60% since I took over the books. For 5 years, at every family dinner, Corinne has introduced me the same way. This is Renata. She helps out. Helps out, like I was a temp who'd stuck around. In February, Corinne called me into her office above the restaurant, the one with the filing cabinets I organized myself 2 years ago, and slid a document across the desk. An amendment to the partnership agreement. It would convert my 5% ownership stake, the one Marcus had given me as a wedding gift, into a management bonus structure. No equity, no vote, just a paycheck I could lose the day someone decided I'd helped out enough. It's just cleaner this way, she said. For the family. I didn't argue. I said I'd look it over. I photographed every page before I handed it back. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I went through the vendor accounts, something I'd built myself, and knew line by line. That's when I found the first thread I wasn't supposed to pull. A property management company I didn't recognize, receiving $1,100 a month from the general account, labeled consulting fee. I looked it up. Harlow Property Group, registered to a duplex on Whitmarsh Lane, 4 miles from our house. The name on the registration was Priya Nandan. Marcus had mentioned a Priya once, years ago, an old co-worker from before we met. I told myself it was a coincidence. I finished the ledger. I went to bed at 3 a.m. I didn't ask Marcus in the morning. I'd learned by then that the fastest way to lose an argument in this family was to start it before you had proof. 2 days later, I drove past Whitmarsh Lane on my way to the wholesale supplier, and I made myself turn onto it. The duplex had a stroller folded on the porch. A child's bicycle leaned against the railing, pink, training wheels still on. Marcus and I don't have children. We'd been trying for 2 years, quietly, through 3 failed rounds at a fertility clinic on Abercorn Street that I paid for out of my own savings, because the restaurant needs the cash flow right now. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I did not knock. I photographed the address plate and drove to work. That was the second reveal. The first had been the money. Now it had a face, even if I hadn't seen it yet. I want to tell you why I didn't confront Marcus that day, or the next, or the one after that. I grew up watching my mother scream her way through every discovery, and I watched my father win every one of those fights just by staying calm and letting her look unstable in front of witnesses. I promised myself young that if I ever needed to fight for something, I would do it with paper, not volume. Anger gives people an escape hatch. Evidence doesn't. So I went back to the ledgers. I traced the consulting fee back 14 months, to the same month the fertility clinic bills started. 14 months of $1,100, $144,000 total, all approved under Marcus's signature, all coded as marketing consulting, a category that had never once come up in a single meeting I'd sat in. I found the third piece by accident. Corinne's assistant, a 19-year-old named Talia who filed paperwork 3 afternoons a week, mentioned casually that she'd mailed a birthday card in March to Mr. Marcus's little girl. She said it like everyone knew. She said it like I was supposed to know too. I said, "That's sweet. Remind me her name?" Talia said, "Nora. She just turned 2. I did the math standing at the filing cabinet. Nora was born 4 months before my second failed embryo transfer. I didn't say anything to Talia. I thanked her and went back to my office and sat with my hands flat on the desk until they stopped shaking. That night I opened the joint email account Marcus and I had shared since our wedding, the one we used for the mortgage and the insurance, the the one he'd forgotten I still had the password to. I found 17 months of messages between him and Priya, filed in a folder labeled, without irony, vendor correspondence. He'd hidden his second family inside my own bookkeeping system. I read all of it in one sitting. I learned the apartment on Whitmarsh Lane was in Priya's name, but the down payment had come from the restaurant's account, laundered through 2 months of fake catering invoices I had personally approved, trusting Marcus's word that they were real. I learned Corinne knew. There was a message from her to Marcus dated the week Nora was born. Keep it quiet until the amendment is signed. Once Renata's off the deed, none of this touches the business. The amendment, my 5%. Suddenly I understood exactly why Corinne wanted my ownership converted to a bonus structure. It wasn't about the family. It was about making sure that when this came out, I had no legal claim to anything they'd have to divide. I didn't sign the amendment. I told Corinne I needed a lawyer to review it first, which was true, just not for the reason she assumed. There was one more email I almost missed, buried 3 folders deep, from Corinne to her own brother, a retired judge in Macon. If Renata ever finds out, we need her stake gone first. Edmund's clause protects the family name, not her. Reading it, I understood something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. This wasn't only Marcus protecting an affair. This was Corinne protecting an inheritance, using her dead husband's own legal language as a weapon against the one person who'd kept the business alive since he'd been gone. I spent the next 3 weeks building a single folder: bank statements, the fake catering invoices, cross-referenced against the actual events they claimed to cover, half of which never happened, screenshots of the emails, a notarized copy of the partnership agreement showing my 5% was still legally mine, amendment unsigned, a copy of Corinne's email to her brother, and a photograph, the one that mattered most, of Marcus picking up Nora from daycare on a day he'd told me he was at a supplier meeting in Charleston. I almost lost my nerve twice. Once, at a Sunday lunch, Corinne mentioned offhand that she'd found a buyer interested in the property next door, someone who could help us modernize once ownership was settled, and looked at me like she expected me to nod along. I nodded along. The second time, Marcus came home early with flowers, the first in 3 years, and said he wanted to talk about getting serious about a baby again. I let him talk. I said that sounded nice. I did not tell him what I already knew. Evidence would end this. My anger would only give him a reason to leave first and call himself the victim. The restaurant's 20th anniversary party was in April. Corinne had planned it for months. A room full of investors, regular customers, the food writer from the Savannah paper, and every relative who'd ever called me the girl who helps out. Corinne stood up with a glass of champagne to toast 18 years of family and integrity. I let her finish the toast. Then I asked if I could add something, as a partner. I didn't raise my voice. I thanked the room for 18 years of Delmar's and said that transparency had always been something this restaurant prided itself on, so I wanted to share one document, not with the room, but with the 2 people it actually concerned. I walked to Corinne and Marcus and set 2 single-page summaries in front of them. Marcus opened his. His face went the color of the tablecloth. Corinne didn't open hers. She said, quietly and quickly, "Renata, whatever you think you have, this is not the place." I said, "You're right. That's why I only brought the summary." I told the room I'd be stepping back from day-to-day bookkeeping while an independent accountant reviewed some discrepancies in the vendor ledger, and that I'd already met with our business attorney that morning. I didn't say Priya's name. I didn't say Nora's. I didn't have to. Marcus's hand was shaking around his glass. Corinne's eyes were already doing the math on who else in that room might have seen the full folder. The following Monday, Corinne's attorney called mine before mine called her. The amendment was withdrawn in writing, my 5% stake formally renotarized. Marcus moved out 3 days later. He asked me not to tell the investors about Priya. I told him that decision had stopped being mine the day he laundered restaurant funds to pay for it. The investor group, once they reviewed the audit, required Corinne to bring in an independent financial reviewer for the next 2 fiscal years, as a condition of keeping their own stake in Delmar's. Corinne stepped back from daily operations entirely. The board asked me to stay on, this time with my ownership documented, my name on the paperwork, and a vote in every decision that used to happen without me in the room. I filed for divorce the following week. I didn't ask Marcus for anything beyond what the marriage had actually built. I didn't need to burn the restaurant down to prove a point. I only needed the people in that room to see it clearly, once, without anyone managing the story for them. I still walk past that dining room every morning before the doors open. Nobody in my family ever apologized out loud. Corinne sent one card, unsigned, with a single line inside. I did what I thought protected us. I understood exactly what she meant by us, and it never once included me. But nobody calls me the girl who helps out anymore either. I built this place for 5 years believing I was helping someone else's dream. I finally understood, the night I opened that ledger, that it had been mine the whole time. I just needed the paperwork to say so. If you found out the family you married into had already decided you were disposable, would you have confronted them the moment you knew, or would you have waited, like I did, until the proof left them nothing left to argue with?